Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Who Watches the Rewatchers, our podcast rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My name is Jared Longbonds. I'm here with my good buddy Alan Barnes. We're rewatching the Buffy the Vampire series, all the seasons, and we're reflecting on it, not only as a historical artifact, but maybe thinking through its themes, its storytelling, and maybe even what it meant to us as individuals. So we're starting today with the very first two episodes. Welcome to the Hellmouth. And what's that second episode called, Alan? Is that called The Harvest?
Called The Harvest, yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, so we're going all the way back to 1997, I believe, when this thing was first put out. I happened to be in the same grade as Buffy Summers, and I want everyone to know that I did have a massive crush on both her and Cordelia Chase. And the first website I built in school was about Cordelia Chase, and I'm sure it's lost to the internet ether, thank the good Lord. But before I embarrass myself any further, Alan, well, let's talk about Buffy and not about my fanboy self. That
is hilarious. For the record, I also had a crush on Cordelia. Who didn't, right?
Who didn't? No.
So Joss Whedon famously got the idea for this the concept of Buffy because he was watching horror movies and he saw blonde girl go into the alley over and over again and then get eaten by whatever vampire was going to be the antagonist of the film. And he had the idea, wouldn't it be cool if the blonde girl could turn around and beat the crap out of that vampire, And that's really the glorious trope reversal that began this entire thing, right?
Which is great. And he always said that he grew up with a feminist mother and he was a strong feminist. And just to get out of the way, he's been accused of some bad behavior that we do not condone. And it brought me down because I did think he was genuinely an advocate for that. But at least his storytelling in a lot of ways was. And we'll leave that aside for now. That's not our business. But I love the reversal of the trope. And in so much of this, it fits into what literary and philosophical theory called postmodernism. And for a lot of things, that meant the way it worked in pop culture was self-referential, turning devices over on their heads, mixing genres up. And boy, Buffy was really self-aware, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Totally agreed. And the other thing that I understand is that he wanted to do this TV show because he had been writing for a long time. He'd worked on Roseanne, and he had written a handful of movie scripts, and he'd been a script doctor in Hollywood for many years. Famously, he was hired to be the script doctor on Toy Story and had rewritten so much of it that he ended up with screenwriting credit on that movie,
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah, and to this day, my favorite Office episode is the one that he did, by the way. I don't know if you've seen that one. But...
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I have to go check it out. Yeah, well, he wrote the screenplay for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, but it got directed by somebody else and was totally out of his control, and he hated how it came out.
So did I, by the way. So did I.
The other thing that he wrote that came out terribly in his opinion was his Alien movie. Did you see that one? I don't remember if it was 3 or 4. It was something like that.
No, I don't know that I saw that one.
It's the one with Winona Ryder in it. That's what I remember.
Gosh, really?
But it was so, both of those were so bad in his opinion. He wanted to try his hand at directing. And I think he had the clout to do it after Toy Story, which is how Buffy happened.
Thank you, Toy Story. That's good to know. Yeah, this show definitely got me through my high school and college, and I've watched it through several times since because for me it's nostalgia. It's a lot of fun. I even get all the emotional feels of leadership, and definitely as a theologian, I have been able to reflect on it, its storytelling, its themes, its philosophy, and reflect on maybe just even what it says about the nature of life. And so I think there's a lot there. So we're going to be fun to take a look at the show with you.
Okay, so the show opens with the trope.
Yeah.
Blonde girl goes into a high school with a boy. He's clearly he clearly has nefarious intentions, right? But then he reverses his own reversal of the trope. The blonde girl turns around and she's the vampire.
Yeah, it's played by Julie Benz, who was the love interest for Dexter in that series, if you remember. She did some things after this, but yeah, and it was also a bit, skeezy. I think the guy was like, "Come on," trying to convince her to go, all that stuff that's not so good. And yeah, so it starts off with a bang and reverses course, and there's that. I don't even know. It's probably a name for the technical reveal of her face, but the way Joss Whedon did the vampires, they had a certain aesthetic that wasn't just the teeth, that they kind of looked a little bit lion-like and
Right.
scary looking face.
Yeah, I think that they did that specifically because they didn't like the visual of teenagers killing teenagers. It wanted to make literal this is a demon thing that I'm attacking as opposed to another person in my class. This episode we get the very first overview synopsis at the very beginning, right before what I was just talking about. They do that whole in every generation born thing, which he got. I read that he got talked into adding that by the network because they were scared people wouldn't get it. And I also read that he thought that was very funny that people wouldn't get it, but decided he had to put that on there.
Yes, it goes away. It goes away. It's not always there.
Okay, so then we see Buffy having her prophetic dream where she's getting ready to go to high school. And I don't know that that's entirely understandable in the episode until you get further into the series. Do you remember this business about the?
Yeah, I mean, she's having the dream, laying there in bed, and what are the elements that she sees?
Vampires, and she's seeing.
I know that she's laying in bed, completely looking like she's not, like she's just like those old mattress commercials where people are smiling and they have their hair all done. Yeah, she's definitely like that for sure. She's tossing and turning. I see. I watched this just last night, and I can't recall all the elements of the vision off the top of my head.
Okay, so I just scanned through it as you were talking. She sees like a horde of vampires walking, and it ends with her seeing the face of the Master, who's going to be the big bad, as they're referred to, but the main villain for the season.
Yes, I love that the big bad is what it's called. By the way, Joss Whedon has a very cute way, and his writers have a very cute way of talking about things like the big bad, and we will come to know her group of friends as the Scoobies.
That's right.
Love all that. Yeah, she has a prophetic dream. She's at a new school. She's moved there with her mom, who's like the most milquetoasty mom that's ever been invented.
Right.
And she's got to come to this new school, and I think she just wants to get away from her past, right?
Right. And they even reference the movie in this. There's a hilarious scene where the principal is talking about how everyone has a fresh start, and he rips up her
transcript, rips it up until he sees it. Well, you burned down the gym, and she's accusing it of asbestos fire, whatnot, all this stuff.
And he starts taping it back together, right?
So the deal is that Buffy, from when she's in LA, she actually starts fighting vampires. She's unsupervised by anybody. Her mom doesn't know. Her parents are split up. Mm-hmm. There's no watcher, which we'll come to know a character named Giles in a bit, who's her watcher, who's like this chosen mentor for her. She's just on her own, and she comes across vampires in her old school, and she kills them, and she causes fires in her school. She gets kicked out. Her mom moves down to Sunnydale, and she's at this new school, and she's going to try to figure out how to live, how to be friends. She's definitely got the look of the popular one, and the popular kids are drawn to her, but she also unstereotypically is not just a popular Valley girl. She's kind to people. She's kind to people who come across as being more on the nerd crowd.
Right.
And yes, she does have that hilarious meeting with her principal, who looks at her transcripts, gives her a fresh start until he starts to read more carefully. And then he's like, not so much.
So she immediately makes 3 friends, possibly 4 if you count Cordelia.
Yes.
They are Xander,
Xander.
Willow, and
Yeah. Let's not worry about him. His name's like Goober. No.
I don't even remember his name. That's terrible. So it seems like I guess the big plot point that happens here is that when she's talking to Willow, she tells Willow to seize the day.
Seize the day. Jesse, by the way, was the name of the guy. I was looking it up. Jesse is the other guy. Yeah, she tells him to seize the day. Hey, don't worry about it. Go seize the day. And Willow is definitely a long-term friend with Xander, and she's nerdy, bookwormish, mousy.
Right.
Tells her to seize the day, which later on that's going to come back and put Willow in a little bit of danger.
Right.
Along the way, she's trying to figure out the school. Cordelia is the attractive cheerleader type who's definitely thinks of Buffy's cool because she's from LA. It's cool in LA. And she tells her not to hang out with Xander and Willow and all those types, but the Buffy's cool, and she wants to hang out with whoever's kind to her. And then she has a run-in also with the character that's going to be known as Rupert Giles, the librarian, because she needs a book. And apparently her new high school did not assign her books, so she had to go searching for her book in the library, which she comes across a very erudite British man, Southern California library, who's wearing tweeds and has the leather satchel and all the quintessential American stereotypes of a stuffy upper crust British intellectual.
Right.
Did I get that right?
No, you got that right. And he's in his mid-40s, and later on that becomes ridiculously funny because she keeps saying how old he is, but and the older I get, the more that attacks me. But what's he going to do?
Absolutely. Because I was watching this last night thinking, oh, he was so old when I first started watching this, and now I'm like, we look alike. But he's played by Anthony Stewart Head, who's a great singer, by the way. I have to add that. He immediately knows who she is and wants to talk to her about her calling, her sacred calling to be the Slayer. And he
pops the book on the table. This is
with vampire spelled as vampire, Vampyr, and it is a very cowboy reveal sort of thing. It's like a boom. Startling thing, and she's thinking she's getting away from her past, and now she's here. Oh man, she's not getting away from any of it. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She wants the normal teenage life. She wants to party, go out with her friends, do her school. That's it. And now this guy's kind of stuffy and totally not Southern California is also telling her she has a sacred duty, a calling, and chosen, and that's the biggest killjoy ever, basically. And she runs away from that for sure. And
hilariously, Xander overhears the whole conversation
in the stacks. He's in the stacks, and he overhears it, and he's still not quite certain what's going on. But the episode also introduces a character that will become important for the Buffyverse not that long afterwards here. And this character is the tall, dark, and handsome is what they call him at first, and he's known later introduces himself as Angel, who is at this point in time a mysterious character who seems to know things.
Right.
And he warns Buffy about this thing called the harvest, and so she's got that word ringing around her head. Somehow he's supposed to be in the know, yet he's not really willing, it seems, in this first episode to sign up to help her. In fact, it's later and he's afraid, which I have a lot of shade to throw at him about all of that. But, it's just kind of like, once you find out who Angel is, you're like, come on, man.
Well, I think, my opinion of that is that they were just trying to figure out the storytelling business, I think that, what's the right way to say this? I think that Whedon, got talked into adding Angel. I don't think that was an original thing that Whedon wanted to have. Because here's the thing, vampires in the Buffyverse represent the problems of adolescence. They represent the things that one has to overcome in order to get through their life. And the reason that the the world was always ending in Buffy is because that's how it feels to a teenage girl, right? Every problem that comes up is the end of the world, and we're going to find out later on. Sorry, spoilers. That Angel is a vampire, quote, with a soul, but vampires are supposed to represent problems. So he does eventually represent a problem for Buffy. But I think that this idea of an ongoing person who was a shade of gray, who was both evil and not evil at the same time, I'm not sure that's something that Joss really wanted in there, but I think he got conned into it.
All right, Alan, I will buy your explanation. I actually think you're really got a great read on how vampires are representative of that in the Buffyverse. I think that's really good, spot on. And I'll buy that maybe Joss Whedon, you don't know exactly everywhere you're going to go with the whole story when you start a TV show. I'm told, and so I'm sure it developed. But at this point in time, it's funny to hear this character who gets his own spin-off show.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Great to help, and
totally.
And you also find out he's a vampire with a soul who's like a couple hundred years old, and his name is Angel, which is not a very popular name in Ireland at the time. And it's silly to me. But anyway, okay, he's the big brooding love interest already. Just kind of they're laying down the hints, and what he's doing is he's serving as that. In the hero's journey, she has been called to adventure. Right? She's met her mentor. She doesn't want the mentor Giles at the time, but she's also got a mentor in Angel who's feeding her information.
Right.
She's able to go back, and there's this great plot device. I don't know how great it is, but it's great for Buffy, called the Bronze. Right. The Bronze exists, and the whole deal about Sunnydale is this town, and somewhere in Southern California, we'll find out is on the Hellmouth, or an entrance or portal into hell, which is the great plot device that means a lot of evil can be in this one little tiny town.
Right.
Smallville will do it later on with that's where the kryptonite landed. So it creates all this, this microcosm of all the big bads in one little area. Right. But Hellmouth works, and that means it's like in the 1980s vampire flick, The Lost Boys. Like the murder capital is really high in this small little Southern California town, and everyone knows that. So Cordelia tells Buffy about this other plot device. That's what I'm going to call it, the Bronze, which is a club.
Sure.
And he says it's on the, where is it? It's near the bad side of town. Where is that? Near the good side of town. Like it's all close in proximity. Sure. But the Bronze is a club with impossibly cool music for a town of that size, serving, it looks like beverages of an adult nature, although they're always undefined, I think, right, to high school students and other kids. And it just seems to be like a lot of place to hang out. It's like a Saved by the Bell. They had their burger joint. What was that called? I don't even know. I don't want to get into that show. But, every show's got their little coffee shop or their little... This is it for Buffy, the Bronze.
Yep.
And you go to the Bronze, and, Jesse, the one that we couldn't remember his name, he's definitely into Cordelia. She rebuffs him. They're there at the dance, or they're dancing, and it just kind of, it's like a little petri dish showing high school politics. Here's the popular crowd, here's the desirable ones, and here are the cast-offs. And Buffy's kind of starting to plant her flag with the cast-offs like the whole time. I think she's been there, done that with the popular crowd in the past, and she just doesn't really have any time for it. And
at the Bronze is when Willow tries to seize the day.
She tries to seize the day by going and talking to a gentleman. And you have to say, this is where Giles shows up, is still trying to sway Buffy, still trying to get Buffy into the scheme that he's been preparing for his whole life.
Sure.
He tells her she must sense, almost like her Jedi mind trick or the Peter tingle for Spider-Man. She's got a sense of vampire. And he goes, can you just try to feel it? And he's getting all very deep and beautiful and poetic. And she goes, right there. And he goes, what? How can you tell? And she goes, look at how the guy's dressed.
Right.
He looks like he's been dead for 10 years. She makes fun of his outfit. Right. She uses nice high school girl logic. And that's who Willow is seizing the day with. This guy is showing interest in her, but now she is about to be vamp food.
Right.
That's the call to action for Buffy. So why don't you take us through what happens next?
There's a cut to the Master and what's going on with the Master. The Master is like like we said earlier, the big bad of the season. He is an ancient vampire who's stuck behind some sort of force field and can't get out. So he's sending all of these other vampires to do his bidding. And one of the vampires that he sends out is his name Luke? Is that right?
Yeah, his name's Luke.
Mm-hmm. And so he sends Luke out, basically get him food. Hey, I need takeout, right?
Yeah, he becomes the vessel. Yeah,
right.
The Master and Luke and that whole little group of vampires is like operating in a very religious milieu. Like they're ancient and liturgical and sacred and ceremonial, and it's going to be different than other vampires in the Buffyverse. And so it's all very hoity-toity almost. And so Luke is the vessel to bring food to the Master. And somehow I think if you get enough of it, you can get out, right? You can get out of his little cell, right? Yeah.
So Willow is taken off to the side by this vampire. Buffy follows in order to save Willow, and in the process of this scene, Julie Bentz's character, what's the vampire's name? I don't remember.
I will get it for you real quick, but continue on.
So her character shows up as well. They end up in a graveyard, and they actually end up in like a beautiful like giant stone tomb, which again is far larger than should be appropriate. Yes,
Darla.
Darla, of course. They end up in this tomb with Buffy, Xander, Willow, and these two vampires. And the two vampires are about to try to kill everybody. But of course, Buffy is far stronger than they expected, and she easily kills the vampire that was macking on Willow. And then Darla disappears.
Luke tries to battle her. It's really funny watching because it is campier. So this first season is definitely campier. The music cues are, and they set it up where Buffy really could be bitten really quite easily. Right. But they just don't know who she is yet. And she gets the upper hand for the time being. And just so that Luke can go back and report to the Master that there's someone who's showed up to town who is actually stronger than we've ever faced.
Right.
It's just setting up everything for what is to come.
So Buffy follows these vampires into this crypt, and by the time everything's said and done, Jesse has been kidnapped by the vampires, and Xander and Willow are left sort of confused about what happened. And that's when Buffy takes them back to the library with Giles, and we get the whole first conversation where Buffy is bringing these two kids into her vampire addled world. She has to convince them that what they saw were in fact vampires.
I don't even know, because I'm not a historian of television, but this has got to be one of the first shows of its kind that was so self-referential or so aware of itself.
Yes.
A delightful way.
Very much. No, one of the reasons that we're even talking about Buffy still at this point in time is because it achieved 3 or 4 things that were totally unique on network television at the time. The first thing that it did was it was one of the very first shows that successfully had the ongoing plot, sort of a soap opera thing that wasn't in fact a soap opera, like a soap opera for adults. You had Dallas and things like that before it, but you never had like a genre TV show that was doing that. The one that tried to do it most successfully before Buffy was The X-Files.
Right. Yeah.
But even it, they kind of got tricked into doing the ongoing episodic thing or the ongoing story plot point thing. They hadn't intended to do that. And then
they only wanted to do Monster of the Week.
They intended for it to totally be a Monster of the Week. And Dana Scully, the actress who plays Dana Scully, got pregnant, and they had to they sort of scrambled to explain why she was off the show for several episodes.
Okay.
And so as a result of that, they developed this whole alien abduction mythos that they had already kind of pointed at earlier in the show. They just sort of expanded on it, and that became the thing that everyone loved. And so they were like, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to rock with that, you know?
Yeah.
Now, Buffy, on the other hand, the way that they dealt with it was they tried to have an ongoing mythos for every season, and the reason that the end of every season sort of feels like the end of the show every time is because Whedon kept thinking they were going to get canceled at the end of every season.
That's great, because they even, so the self-referential or the self-awareness of it comes back in regards to that, because, like, you know, that it's always like, it's another apocalypse, we're having another one, right? And then they even kind of crack wise to themselves about it. Yeah. And when we think about this from a philosophical point later on, the way that they keep building the mythos, it makes it complicated, because they keep adding these layers of big bads and these layers of dimensions and stuff that really kind of makes it a very complicated mythology.
It is. But I think that's what the nerds like about it.
Yeah, it's what we nerds like about it.
and I think that's what, and I think the other thing that made Buffy very successful is just the straight up mix of genres, right? Yeah. I think part of the reason that we're not talking about the movie is because it was a straight comedy.
Right.
Whereas Buffy was much more like, you know, not trying to imply that it's like Shakespeare, but a little bit of a way. It's a little like Shakespeare in that, you know, the comedy elements also have tragic elements, also have you know, so on and so forth. You know, it's not really a single thing at any point. And I think that they consciously developed that so that they could go in a bunch of different directions over time.
It's got heart. That's the
unquestionably. I think you're exactly right about that. The other thing that I think that they did that was wise, and I think you might have mentioned this earlier, they really pulled from a wide range of vampire lore. Like, there wasn't like a specific vampire myth they were going. They just like explored everything and then made up a couple of new things and
there's actually, I mean, we'll talk about it more, but there's actually, like, in vampire study, there's the cinematic vampire and there's folklore vampire.
Right.
When you study folklore vampire, we're talking about different traditions, different cultures, and so on. And you're talking about, I mean, something that did give rise to the cinematic vampire, but because of the way authors write and then the filmmakers make films and stuff, traditions get developed and overblown or whatnot. And Buffy is postmodern enough, and I as a theologian, I struggle with that, how we use that word, but it's postmodern enough in that it has the aesthetic of mixing and mashing up. And so we have, and I will say that through Buffy it becomes inconsistent, but we have interesting things to say about it. So we'll get onto that. So they're back at the library. Take us back to the narrative. So they're back at the library, and she's explaining the real world to the kids. They're being invited into.
So's Giles, right? And I think this is the first time we really see Giles sitting in his what would become his ultimate role, at least for the next, you know, couple seasons, of being the great expositor. You know, he's constantly like explaining. He's doing the information dumps. You know.
Yeah.
And I thought that the guy who played Giles, Anthony Head, is that his name?
Stuart Head, yeah.
Yeah. He, I thought that he did a great job throughout all of that, just trying to make those information dumps more palatable, try to give them at least a little bit of humanity with the way that he would, you know, gesture through them, you know, the glasses thing.
Or,
or the way that he would talk about how this affects him emotionally, even if he didn't really talk about that. Like, you could feel it in the way that he delivered the lines, you know. I thought that was marvelous. But the big thing
early on, he's trying to establish his relationship with Buffy, and it's more like teenager irritated, you know, irritated at adult irritated. It becomes a really fatherly figure later, but it's kind of more just hangover. He's a parental hangover figure there. She just had teenage life, and he's like thrusting upon her all this responsibility.
You know, the other thing though that I thought was really great about Giles is that I think that he's there not only to be a parental figure for Buffy, but also I think that they did a good job of designing his character in a way that it's clear he doesn't have everything figured out. And so he's growing and becoming something else as a result of his experiences with Buffy too.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I was in school watching this, I could have imagined a life career path where somehow if I could find a great British university to study Watcher studies, and then because if you see his apartment later on, it's a pretty killer apartment in Southern California, and he gets to wear the tweeds and be cool, and that seems pretty awesome, you know.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I love how, now it's starting to dole out. This will become the pattern for the rest of the show. They gather, they get the brain trust together. They're thinking through the big bad. Giles does some research. Now he's recruiting the kids to help do some research. Buffy's going to go do the brute force stuff. And this is where I believe Willow, who is quote unquote the nerd at the time,
Right.
is got the job of looking all this up on. Does she call it the net?
She definitely says the computer. I don't know if she says the net, but she's clearly able to surf the net better than any human should.
Is that it's so it's like, and then she's like explaining it to Giles like this newfangled technology. It's so
Yeah.
funny to look back on those days, and I guess that was but was the internet better back then?
Let's see. We're talking mid '90s. I think that it was so brand new. I think that it was a glorious place to share information because the people who didn't know how to surf the net weren't there yet. You know?
Yes, yes. Well, I think it's a terrible place now because it's all about money,
Yes, that's right.
all marketables. So anyway, so that's what's going on, and now we kind of have something of a plan, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so Buffy has to leave school midday in order to go wander around in the sewers.
Yeah. Now, I love that, and the principal catches her
That's
trying,
right.
and this liberal, tolerant principal who's going to tear up a record is now like a hawk, scanning
Yes.
the world for Buffy, and that's a pretty an ominous gate for a school, don't you think? He shuts on
Oh,
her.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I had that thought when I saw it too. I wonder about, uh, so part of me wonders if that's like, um, the way that schools have gone since I was in school because of stuff. Um, but the other part of it is that they shot the entire series on a warehouse lot, you know, and so that's probably just the fence around the warehouse.
I thought the school was the same school they shot Beverly Hills 90210. Is that not
Okay,
true?
so they use the front of that school on occasion, but
Ah,
at the actual hall they had one first season they had one hallway that they built in the warehouse.
yeah.
Anytime you see people walking down the hallway, it's the same hallway. They're just like shooting it from different angles.
That's funny. I know later on that when they're in the magic store in town, they said that to walk from one place to the other, they had to use really small steps because you weren't far.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. So now she's not deterred by the principal shutting the gate and locking it or whatever interface.
Yeah. She just jumps over it.
Yeah, jumps over cheesy music, cheesy effect for the first season, first episode. I
Absolutely.
think he said something to me offline about Willow. This is the last time she looked like a school marm or something, or a
Yeah, yeah,
grandma.
yeah. So I said this is the last time she was wearing grandma clothes. That's what I said. Yeah, yeah.
They're gonna gussy her up in some overalls in a little bit.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. Okay, so she heads down the sewer. Um, there's a scene when Buffy's leaving where Willow and Xander sort of have a moment in that same hallway we're talking about. And apparently that was shot almost a year later.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they had to like Xander's hair was way shorter and stuff, and they had to like do weird comey stuff with it in order to try to like put a band-aid on it. But yeah, there's a beat there where because they shot the entire season before the first episode aired as a result of being a mid-season replacement. And so they felt like there was a narrative bit where the motivation behind why Xander would then follow Buffy into the sewer, which is what's about to happen. They needed a moment to explain how he got there because in the original version, he just sort of shows up.
Yeah, you see here at the beginning, the Xander is kind of becomes the beating heart of the crew. Later, it's always kind of played up by him that he's the most talentless, or at least gifted, or something like that.
Right.
But he is that emotional heart of the crew. He's drawn by his emotions to follow. He's
Mhm.
been told not to. He's been. I don't know if at this point it's just the egotistical nerve of a teen who can't, he's got to be macho, or he can't be too scared. I mean, there's something like that in Xander a bit, but he follows, and he's going to be confronted. He's going to have to look at his friend Jesse, who had been kidnapped, and he's going to have to, see that Jesse has been turned into a vampire himself.
Mhm.
And I think he was even told by Buffy that, it's not him. What you see is no longer there.
Right. Right.
Vampires are demons. Demons have come and set the soul is absentia of the body, and the demon has come and set up shop at something else. You are looking at what has killed your friend.
Right. Right.
Xander hears it all, but it's nonetheless when he does encounter Jesse, it's hard for him.
That's right. That's right. So, Buffy finds her way back down to the sewer as a result of not only Willow's internet searches where she finds the complete city plans, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
right. Yeah,
Um,
like, they are.
and then also when she goes back to the crypt where Jesse was abducted, she runs into Angel, and this is when she actually says, "What's your name?" And he says, "My name's Angel," or however he
Yeah.
says it.
Yeah. Can we? Earlier I was throwing some shade at Angel a little. Can we throw a little shade at the cross he gives her?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you can throw shade at Angel. I mean, I think there are a lot of big problems with that character. To your point, please give some shade to the cross he gives her.
I mean, we're dealing with this. I mean, you told us all, I guess, that the network said to Joss Whedon, we really want that little tag at the beginning, every generation, and we will build out that lore over time. But
Right,
this is like a generations old like calling. This isn't a chosen profession. This is a vocational mystical calling, and it's going to have this genealogy that goes back, and the vampires have their own tradition, and it's all this tradition stuff.
right.
And he gives her what amounts to, like, when I was in like school in the 90s, it was like a store at the mall called Claire's, which was like a cheap like jewelry store for women. And
Right.
it's like a Claire's or a Forever 21 or whatever it is, like a cross, like a cheesy 1990s like cross you got in your stocking when you were a kid, and you thought it was going to look cool on a turtleneck or something like that.
Right.
It's just, it is nothing like ornate. It's not historic. It doesn't look like a relic of any type. It's just like, and it's not, it doesn't even look like you put in money into it at a nice store. It looks just a little cheap. So anyway,
No, I agree, man. They do that a couple times in the series where it feels like they introduce trinkets, and I wonder if there wasn't some like you know uh cooperation between the network and Claire's. Who knows?
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the artifacts in this first episode, I mean, later on, you see Buffy's arsenal over time, in her trunk in her room. I did notice like this when she's going to prepare for battle, she opens it up and there's like, some crosses.
Right.
And again, the cross is it's not a very like nice looking cross. It's like a lame kind of, it looks like 1990s trying to be cool cross, but it didn't have any religious or like even aesthetic gravitas to it. And then there's like 14 plastic vials that are meant for holy water.
Right.
Now, so I watched that as a teen. It's like, oh, that looks like holy things, But now that I went into becoming a clergy person and studied theology and stuff, I'm looking at, I know all that stuff, and I'm like, they went to like a religious supply store and bought like
Yes.
vials
Yes. 100%.
of it, and there's some garlic sitting in there,
They
Yeah,
probably got that stuff the same place they got the orb of Thessaly.
that's the orb of Thessaly, right? In the orb of Thessaly section of the
Yeah, that's
store.
right. That's right. So Buffy gets past Angel. She goes into the sewer. Xander shows up because he doesn't want Buffy to fight alone. They run into the vamps. They find Jesse. They think they're rescuing Jesse, and then Jesse turns around and he's got vamp face, and that's the
Yeah,
big.
man. Right. Yeah. And just and Xander has a very hard time with it.
That's right. That's right.
I think. I mean, I think it's. I think it's trying to show. I mean, I think that does show his character's heart, though. I mean,
Think
he's
so.
not turned on a dime,
Right. Right.
uh,
Right.
and he's the one who will be there for his friends in the end. I mean, I think that comes all the way through. It's a hard time.
So then we get the scene where Luke is made the vessel by the Master.
Yes, and Luke is a scary vampire looking, right? Like that actor, I don't have his name pulled up, but he was a villain in so many things when I was
Sure.
right.
Yes.
He's got this very iconic look to his mouth and his cheekbone. He played a lot of villains in the 80s and 90s.
He unquestionably did. In fact, he had a long like a recurring role as like an alien character on the X-Files.
X-Files. That's exactly where I knew him. Yep. Poor guy. Poor guy. No, he was typecast. I know he was. Poor, you know.
For sure. No, no, no. They're both of them fantastic. The guy who played the Master, though, he had been a villain in a bunch of films previously.
Yeah.
Luke, of course, he's sort of like the action hero villain as opposed to the thinking villain that the guy who played the Master is.
True, very
Um,
true.
yeah. So at that point, um, they go back to the library now
Hmm.
that they have this information that Jesse's a vampire and that they know that the harvest is coming. And so this is
Yeah.
where Giles does the exposition dump of what the harvest is. And now and now they're going to go to the bronze and
But
try.
before that, let's just throw out the thing that's real fun. I mean, it's just so fun that in the public high school library, it's got the greatest occult section ever amassed,
Yeah,
and
right,
no one
exactly.
seems to know that except for
I think someone brings it up in a later episode that it's got a shocking number of occult books or whatever for a public
for a
library.
high school library. Yeah, it's just he's always throwing out some really cool old book. That's all I know.
Yes, yes, yes. And not only are they really cool old books, in a lot of cases they're like probably first editions,
Yeah,
leather bound and have the old paper and everything. And
yeah. All
uh,
right, so you said to go
and there
back
is a
to the
lot, there's a throwaway line from Willow in these first couple episodes where she says, "Oh, you've met the new librarian. He's really cool. He used to work uh in London." Or in Britain at the library, maybe the British library or something like that.
oh that one. Yeah. Okay, so they're back at the bronze.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the vampires show up to do their thing where they are going to um, feed on these kids, and the more often they feed, the more they're giving. The more Luke is feeding, the more he's giving power to the master, and it looks like the master's about to be able to get out of his like force field cell or whatever it is that he's.
Luke the vessel is the one who's getting to eat all the tasty morsels.
Right.
The part I really like is that Jesse shows up, who was Xander's friend, who was a nerd who had the hots for Cordelia,
Right.
who Cordelia turns her nose at in an earlier scene in the bronze, but now all of a sudden she's hanging out with him.
Mm.
And now she sees something in him. And what she sees is that cocksure vampire swagger.
Yeah.
Of course, now he in turn wants to feast on Cordelia, but he doesn't get to because she is for
The
the
master.
master through Luke.
Yeah, right.
And I forget how he says it, but he's like, "What? I want some." It's like kind of
Very goofy. That's right.
yeah.
So, Buffy shows up, and you know, after a little bit of action occurs, um, she says something like, "Do you remember how this ends?" She says something like, "You forgot something too, uh, sunrise," and
Yeah,
she
she
says something and
breaks the
cracks the
light.
scene.
Excellent. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And Luke ducks like he's about to get, overwhelmed by sunlight. And of course then she's able to stake him because he's distracted, but
Like you idiot, it's only like 11 o'clock at night.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. There's no sun coming anytime
I
soon.
rewatched it because I've seen this 1,000 times, but I rewatched it by the way, for those of you out there who love Buffy, I love Buffy so much, but I don't typically go back and watch the first one when I just want to watch an episode here or there. It's not the shining example to me. But so it's been a long time. So I went back. I thought, boy, they haven't been in the bronze all night, and sure enough, she's just tricking him,
Yep, yep, yep.
and she gets to be smarmy and sarcastic, which is always fun to see Buffy be, and she stakes him. Which is interesting. We haven't mentioned this yet, but the way that they decided to how staking would work is that they would stake them and then they would just sort of immediately like disappear into the dust. And
Right.
as the graphics get better, it gets more interesting. But that's the fundamental way it happened.
Right.
Where, in vampire lore, folklore, well, in cinematic vampire tales, staking may just kill them and their body's there. It doesn't just disappear.
Right. And in
Where,
some lore, you can pull the stake out and they come back to life, you know?
yeah, in folkloric vampire stuff, the reason why staking was a thing is because if you had, oftentimes people had certain, they believe the theory is that certain people had certain blood disorders and anemia and all sorts of wasting diseases.
Right.
And thought might be that there was this creature parasiting, taking the life of another creature. I mean, that's how disease is anyway, right? Like it's almost a parasitic sort of experience when you have a wasting disease. And so they could dig up when they would dig up a corpse. Oftentimes, if they saw blood around the mouth, that the theory would be that this was a vampire, which the blood could come up for a whole host of biological as well as
Sure.
illness-related reasons. So that's some theory as to where vampirism came from, the thoughts of vampirism, and the way we imagine it. But garlic was a medicinal herb, and so often they would imagine putting garlic in the mouth of the corpse. And staking is a way to nail the body to the coffin or to the casket or into the ground so that the body could not rise. Okay? That's what staking was.
Mhm.
So, interesting how they do it. Very.
No, totally. I mean, I have been led to believe that the reason for that decision was just to clean up the vampires so there weren't a whole bunch of like, yeah, the need for the police to be like, where did this body come from all the time, you know?
Right, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a nice plot device for that because it's already a crime-ridden town as far as
That's right. That's right.
murder capital of the world, kind of. Yeah.
And I think that that would have just added a level of complication they weren't trying to get to. You know, the pitch for Buffy originally was My So-Called Life meets The X-Files.
Wow.
Do you
My
know My So-Called Life? I know you know The X-Files, but do you know the
My
other?
So-Called Life was before Buffy.
Yes.
No, I watched it in high school too.
Right.
Yeah, man. My name's Jared, and the actor Jordan Catalano was Jared Leto. So I somehow thought that meant that I was very hot or something. Didn't really transfer to girls thinking that, but
Yeah, yeah, right. For me either, my friend. For me either. Um, yeah, no. I think that whole high school drama would have gotten too complicated if they had like law enforcement showing up all the time. So I think that that was a great device for that. But I also was really fascinated by the fact that they didn't pull more from some of the most famous vampire stuff out there, which is of course the Dracula story. You know, I'm surprised we didn't see vampires turning into wolves or bats or whatever through this thing.
right. Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to just talk more about how the Vampire Slayer really is, and they say it in that little tag that they created for the show, but vampires, demons, and all that. So it becomes Vampire Slayer really is a misnomer for a fighter of all mystical big bads,
Sure, sure,
and an opportunity to create whatever you wanted to create, really,
sure,
chaos, steam.
sure. And like we said earlier, you know, the whole idea is for these big bads, for these monsters, to represent different problems that she's going through as a teenager. It's to represent the ways that we're going to get through adolescence. Which, by the way, is, you know, every once in a while someone will say something about, you know, how much they wish there was a Buffy revival with Sarah Michelle Gellar. You know, we'd love to see what the Slayer looks like as a, you know, 40 something or whatever. And I think that would be, I don't think that that would be very effective because the whole idea is for the monsters to represent things that you're going through and trying to overcome through adolescence. And I think as we actually saw with Angel, trying to develop monsters that represent the problems that we're trying to get through in adulthood get progressively less and less interesting. Because when you're an adolescent, any problem that comes up feels like the end of the world. And therefore, that's why we're constantly dealing with an apocalyptic problem in Buffy.
Yeah, I'd have to take a different angle to get at it. I'm not even sure how that would Off the top of my head, I'm not even sure how that would look. It would have to take a darker tone, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
certainly.
The comics do, but all right, let's continue on with where we're at in this story.
Well, actually, the only thing that's left to talk about is the fact that there's sort of a denouement after this, where they sort of set up where the series is going to go, and they basically just say, "Hey, not only will Buffy be fighting vampires, but she'll be fighting all these other things,
Yes.
because we're on the Hellmouth."
Yes, and the master's there still waiting
Yep.
for a way to get out. And yeah, so I mean, going back, it definitely took me back, and I love your description of these being the teenage problems anthropomorphized into the world of monsters. Um, I do think it's going to. I do think the show gets into dealing with some interesting things on the spiritual, philosophical aspects, but right now it's just dealing with that teenage angst and starting the story. And Buffy is, in a sense, called to adventure. If we're looking at the great trope of Joseph Campbell's
Right.
heroes, right? She's called to adventure. She's met her mentor. The
Mhm.
problems in
Tried
front
to
of her.
reject the call.
Tried to reject the call, and so she's on. And it really follows that narrative pretty well. Um, I will say, if I didn't say it earlier, there is going to come a time in this series where Buffy gives me emotional feelings about leadership. I mean, I connect with it in leadership, seeing the difficult path she has to walk and
Mhm.
carrying certain feelings that only she carries. Not to vaingloriously assume as a leader that I am quote unquote the chosen one for saving the world. But sometimes when you have the burden of leadership in a certain way, you do feel lonely, like she feels, right?
Sure.
And so I think there's some really kind of potent things about leadership in here as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. Well, I think that's episode one, unless there's anything else that you want to add.
No, looking forward to the next and more.
All right. Awesome.